Around. Welcome to the West Shore Photography Club. It's Monday, September the 13th, 2011, and this is a regular Monday evening meeting that we have. This is a special meeting for the West Shore Photography Club because it's the first meeting of what our club fiscal year is, our club year, excuse me, not fiscal year, our club year. And it starts in September for 2021, and then it goes into September of 2022. So this is our typical kickoff meeting that we have each year, and that's why we have a very special speaker tonight, which we'll get into in just a moment. Okay. Last week, Wednesday night, we had to cancel our trip. We had to postpone our trip to photograph the night's fountains at the state capitol. And we are scheduled to do that on Wednesday evening, but Terry Longenecker sort of threw rain on our project here because he had made me look at the weather forecast, and we possibly, maybe, may have rain again on Wednesday night. So we'll just have to delay that for another time. So, but we will have that on this Wednesday night, if it all goes well, and at 7 o'clock. And then the following week, we have another session with Karen Cummings. It's not the following week, it's a week after that, I think. I forget. Okay, you'll get an email on it, but Karen Cummings is going to take us through the city of Harrisburg at night in only the safe areas she promises. And we are going to follow in her footsteps, and she has great images from her project of Goodnight Harrisburg. Next Monday night, we have an image review, and there is no theme, and Mike Donovan is going to be the speaker. Excuse me, not the speaker. He's going to be the reviewer that night. So make sure you get your images in by Thursday night this week. And, oh, we had a field trip on Saturday. And Norbert, you want to give us a little review of that?
Yes, Joe. Yeah, we had nine members show up. It was a beautiful morning, but it was a little disappointing in some ways because the skateboarders were more novice, I guess. They were not doing the performance that we thought we were going to find. They were not doing all the flips and on the rails and all. They were more novice skateboarders, I guess. But anyway, there was 9 members. It was a beautiful morning, good camaraderie. And that's basically it. I just wish it was a little better photographic wise, but it didn't happen. You know, it's kind of a catch thing there. You know, you either do or you don't. So yeah. We'll give it a try sometime later. So anyway, thanks for the ones that attended.
Okay. Okay. This evening, we have truly a world-class speaker, photographer, Sean Lowe. And he's going to tell us a story, as you can see on the screen, of storytelling via wildlife photography. Now, I was going to give you my introduction to him and talk about all the things he did at the very early ages. But Sean, I think, was afraid I was going to take all of his time this evening and yak in the way, which I have a tendency to do. And so he said he would give his own introduction. But I would like for everybody, if you would, even though you're muted, we can all see your hands. We can give a round of applause to Sean and thank him for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. It's all yours. Okay. One thing I wanted to mention, that we will not be taking questions live this evening. I'm going to ask you to put them into chat, and then if we have time at the end, we will then ask Sean some of those questions.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. I'd like to start off by thanking Joe and Dennis and the West Shore Photography Club for allowing me the wonderful opportunity to present to storytelling via wildlife photography. Okay, let's get started. Well, my name is Sean Lowe, and having sat through multitudes of wildlife talks myself, I know that people like to dive into the technicalities of going to exotic places and getting that shot. And while I find that very fascinating, I also remember thinking as a beginner that while this all sounded awesome, it was just not pragmatic enough for me. I wanted advice for simply helping me make my photos pop, and that was very hard to find. In this presentation, I want to focus on tips that can be applied to animals that may be very accessible to you, whether it be ducks at your local pond or just local wildlife in general. So I want to give you a lay of the land and introduction of how to tell a more impactful story with your wildlife photography. And so who am I? Well, I've grown up studying arts and painting, born and raised in New York City, and also play the piano since the 2nd grade. Art's always been a part of me, and I've always been curious at finding new ways how to express the way I feel about different things. I've also been interested in photography at a very young age, even took several classes in undergrad. And it wasn't until I won an award for a publication in National Geographic Online that I decided to use that very piece in a resume for the National Aquarium down in Baltimore. And lo and behold, I got the job. So I was a full-time professional wildlife photographer, in-house wildlife photographer. Since then, I've been published in various magazines and publications like Discovery, Times, National Geographic. And you guys can follow me if you have Instagram through Sean Lowe Photography or my website, www.seanlowephotography.com.
Sean, I'm gonna interrupt you for a second. Someone is indicating that they cannot see your presentation. Does anybody else have that problem? And if you hold the space bar and just holler out if you do.
I can see it fine.
I can
Okay.
see it fine also.
Okay, Lori, I don't know
I
what,
see it okay.
I can see it.
okay, good.
No problems here, Joe.
Okay, the person that's having that problem, I don't know what that might be
I'm
causing.
okay too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, continue on, Sean. Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries. Okay. So you guys can follow me at Sean Lowe Photography on Instagram or www.seanlowephotography.com. All right. So I want to get into the question, what makes a photograph compelling? In portrait photography, there's a priority about getting the subject in focus, right? For street photography, you will sense an emptiness if there wasn't a story involved, if there was a lack of layers. For landscape photography, it wouldn't make sense if there wasn't great composition, correct? And for macro, there has to be detail. Otherwise, what are you really trying to focus on? With wildlife photography, are we taking pictures of animals to get the close-up details? Is it because it's a specifically rare animal to see? Is it because we want to challenge ourselves to get a technically challenging photograph? There's a lot of questions to be asked here. And before diving deeper, I want to get into the different types of wildlife photography. So while working at the National Aquarium, I had to photograph a lot of animals for documentation. Yes, these are wildlife photos, but they're IDs, the IDs that you see with the facts on top of the animal. There's also the journalistic approach of taking pictures for animals, mostly for conservation. It doesn't necessarily have to be a picture of the animal per se, but people cleaning up the harbor or people out in the wild, enjoying and respecting nature. There are also scientific photos that I've taken and these photos need to capture the exact colors and fine details with references and studies. For example, working at the National Aquarium, I have to take pictures of dissections of animals or surgeries of sea turtles and all sorts of scientific photos. And lastly, there's fine art, where we could really let our inner creativity come out and be imaginative for aesthetic or intellectual purposes. There's a basic structure of a story, and here I have a little picture of a traditional story. We want to ask questions as in, how do we get the audience, how do we guide the audience through our photos to explore the stories we want to share? How do we make our stories relatable and memorable? Not all photos need to have complicated stories. Do we have to leave the story, the photo up for interpretation, or do we want to guide our viewer to what we're trying to share? All right. In this presentation, I want to focus on a single photo as opposed to a collection of photos, because we want to captivate our audience immediately. Okay. Now, there's always been wildlife in art since the caveman days, right? I often find inspiration for my photos and paintings. Ever since I was a kid, being brought up in New York City, my mother would take me to all these different museums, and I would gaze at these paintings and ask myself, why is the painting painted the way it is? It wasn't until I was older that I realized that everything is put there for a purpose, and everything is left out also on purpose, right? There has to be a balance. And I practice recreating what I've seen in these paintings through my photography, right? There needs to be attention to details and elements that make the photo feel complete. So let's take a look at a few examples. These are not my paintings, just paintings I found online that I kind of like. This one here, when I look at this piece, I ask myself, why are the cranes flying from the left to the right? Why is there motion blur in the wings? If there's motion blur in the wings, why is the windmill not spinning? And these are questions we can ask ourselves because the artist put it there on purpose to paint a story for us. Right? When I look at these, I always ask myself, well, why is there 6 giraffes or 5 elephants or 1 moose? Why is there ducks that have their wings and feet cropped out, right? Not very traditional in a sense, but nonetheless compelling and definitely artistic. So always ask the why. When looking at the picture, the painting on the left, you see a tiny snowy owl in a huge environment. What is the artist trying to convey to us? So that this is like a very desolate area, very wild. And the painting on the right, we see a turtle with an ant, right? And the ant gives us a sense of the scale of this painting. And perhaps this turtle could fit right in my palm, yet it seems huge, you know, in this painting. So let's get right on into it. Let's discuss the principles of wildlife photography. To tell an effective story, we need to discuss all these principles that may aid us into wildlife photography. We all like shapes: circles, triangles, rectangles. In basic terms, shapes describe a flat enclosed area of space. Spaces can be constructed with colors and lines, but all shapes are limited to 2 dimensions, width and length. Here we have a snowy owl, okay? What shape do we see? Well, I see an oval. Right. Ovals and circular shapes are great for directing a single point of focus, appropriate for portraits, right? They're simple, they're direct, they're efficient, and they emphasize a fascinating encounter. In this case, I think it really works. Let's take a look at another photo. A male orangutan. Does this work? Right? In my opinion, it does not. And why is that? Sometimes a circle is too simple. It lacks guiding the viewer. It doesn't capitalize on the traits of our subject. When you see a wild male orangutan, you see these big, big arms, right? And you want to show that this is a very strong and powerful animal. And the circle just doesn't do it as well. Okay. Take a look at another shape. This is a Komodo dragon. And it doesn't seem to be a circle. It is actually a triangle. Triangles show stability or instability, therefore emphasizing movement. It's an efficient way to focus attention, emphasizes the massive size of this Komodo dragon. And in this case, I think that really works. However, triangles, say like in this photo, I don't think it works quite as well because it translates to aggression, like the parrot flying above your head, ready to bomb you, right? It's not very flattering for the parrot, right? You see different shadows. It just doesn't quite work in my opinion. We move on to different triangles. We have the right triangle, right? Does this work? You can integrate the objects with your subjects, the object being the flower here. It's implied to help strengthen the impact of the photo, and I think it really works. Let's move on to a different shape. And this is taken at the Taj Mahal. How about these monkeys? The bench is a dead giveaway. This is a rectangle. And so be creative. Use shapes, not just of the animals, but also the objects that they interact with. Next thing I want to brush up on is textures. Textures refers to the visual quality of the surface of an object, reveals through variances in shape, tone, and color depth. Texture brings life and vibrance to images that would otherwise appear flat and uninspiring. So I like to think rough, smooth, hard, soft, liquid, soft, lumpy, gritty. And in this case, this is a bison in Yellowstone during the winter. We see how thick the fur feels and how soft it feels, and it must be very warm in there for the bison. However, the snow seems quite dry and piercing even. What about this type of texture? This is a golden plover chick taken in Iceland, all right? And it's camouflaging here in this soft and spongy moss, and it gives us a sense of safety. However, when the chick started to move, it crossed over these rocks, which were rough and jagged, and it made me feel very nervous for the safety of the chick. Notice how with the absence of texture, we don't really get that feel for the photo. Does it invoke as much emotion as the previous photos did? All right, let's move on to color. I want to talk about dominant and receding colors. In photography, the dominant colors are the warm colors, red, yellow, orange. The cooler colors are the receding colors, blue, green, and purple. The warm colors are dominant because they demand your attention first, like a stop sign, leaving the receding colors to fade into the background more. Now with this red-eyed tree frog, the red really stands out and just, it's quite beautiful. But with too much red, you get a scene like this, which is another poison, which is a poison dart frog, type of poison dart frog. And here, the red is overwhelming, right? However, even though there's contrasting colors here, we have dominant color red. The background is also in a warm tone, and the background adds to the foreground, which is also a warm orangey hue tone. So I think it works, but what is better than this? Well, let's try colors that contrast even more. David's red-eyed tree frog and leaf. Notice how red the eyes are? This is based off contrasting colors. And they're composed of the red and green, which you see, which are opposite of each other on the cover view. So as long as you match colors which are opposite of each other on the cover wheel, your colors are really gonna stand out. Say like the New York Knicks with the blue and orange, or the Lakers, purple and yellow. Lighting can also change the color and therefore change the mood of the scene. Snowy owl posed for me during sundown, and I waited for it for another 10 minutes, and this is what I got. The shadows became blue and aqua, teal even. Same owl, same location, just 10 minutes apart. And sometimes just wait for the light to change, it could get different colors. Let's take a look at this little guy. Right. So I saw this crab on the beach. I believe it was in Sri Lanka, and there was waves behind it, blue aqua waves, and it was really beautiful. But I wanted to get the eyes to pop out, and you know the sand is yellowish like the crab. So what I did was I got really low where the horizon, where the waves coincided behind the eyes, which allowed the eyes to pop. See how much it pops if I just cropped out the eyes, and therefore leading our attention directly to the eyes. Let's take a look at this one, right? So this photo was photoshopped. I changed out the background colors, but this is what it should have been because there was grass everywhere. This was taken on a farm in Costa Rica. However, this is the photo that I got out of the camera. So pink and magenta, where would I get that in nature, right? There was a kid walking behind this farm, and I asked him to stand behind this photo. And he had these magenta purplish hue pants on, and that's the color of his pants in the photo. So there are often times where I pay attention to the background more than the subject, and I move myself in different angles to get certain backgrounds to complement the foreground and the subject. So don't always go chasing for your subject. Find a good background and you can wait for the subject to come into view. Talk about patterns. I love patterns. Pattern photography utilizes elements that are repeated. The repetition of lines, shapes, tones, or colors can create interesting images. There are photographers who use the pattern as the main subject of an image, while others use it to enhance the overall composition and look of the photo. And here we have the classic zebras. Well, I wanted to add some color to that. So this is what I went for. Zebras in the grass. This is natural camouflage. A lot of patterns in nature are there for a reason. A lot of animals use camouflage to hide. So this creates another layer in the story that it's not just there to look pretty, they're actually there to hide from lions and leopards and stuff. Let's check out some more patterns. It's another poison dart tree frog. And it's on these leaves, which really look interesting. So I asked myself this question: did this frog evolve to blending with these leaves, or did the leaves evolve to have this pattern so that animals that might consume it avoid it due to the poisonous frogs in the habitat? And having the frog with this pattern, I think, really tells a great story. Next, let's move on to dominant elements. The dominant element in a photograph is the one that everything else points to. It is the element that attracts the eye first. Your dominant element is the starting point of the visual story you're telling. And from there, you can create a subdominant element to guide the viewer where to look next. Take a look at this photo of orangutans. Notice how dominant they are? The orangutans take up nearly a third of the photo itself, right in your face. Let's move on to direction of light. Lighting is photography and it's awfully important, right? And here I want to quickly discuss 3 different types of lighting: front lighting, side lighting, and back lighting. These are puffins in the Arctic sunset. So these puffins are side lit, which means that with the light hitting the side of their contours, you get these details and shadows and highlights, making these puffins feel three-dimensional almost. This is why a lot of portraits or light are done with the light coming from the side. Look at different type of lighting. Front lighting at an angle and done poorly, it tends to flatten out your subject. It's kind of like putting your subject on a copy machine where everything is evenly illuminated. So try working the light at an angle instead of directly in front of the subject. Slightly overcast light helps soften the shadows as well. In this case, it really works. Although the parent bird on top with the fish is softly lit, you have the 2 chicks on the bottom, which have that side lighting, which really makes that front side lighting, which really accentuates them. And this is our last type of lighting, backlighting. The best light to use for separating your subject from the background. Unfortunately, backlighting provides very little illumination on the front of your subjects. So I really had to pull out all these shadows. Through the back of my camera, the orangutans look completely black. Therefore, I used the histogram to check my photo, separating the subject from the background and giving a 3-dimensional feel to the shot. So with all these principles, we want to start getting to how we could lead the eye, right? And there are many ways to lead the eye. There are highlights, brightness gradients that draw our attention to the subject. There's the position of subjects, the direction of how they're ordered, depth of field, blurring out the background and having the foreground or the subject in focus, right? There's also the complexity. Do you want to keep the photo simple or complex? Do you want the viewer to engage in it for a longer period of time, or is it just something you see on social media? And I believe the combination of techniques will best help you achieve the results that you're looking for. So, with that being said, in the Western culture, we read from the left to the right, and this is called directionality. By the end of the 1100s, the Latin alphabet, which is written left to right, had replaced writing in ruins due to the spread of Roman Christianity throughout Europe. Once English changed to Latin alphabet, writing and reading direction changed too. And this isn't the case across the world. There are countries and places and cultures where they read from the right to the left or from the bottom to the top, right? So the way we interpret our photos is directly correlated to where we're presenting our photos. So let's take a look at this picture. Right? There's 3 bears here, and it's a funny photo. And the story that comes out to me is that the mother bear on the left is asking the cubs whether they're ready to cross the river. The cub in the middle leans on its mother's rear as he seems completely petrified to cross. The second cub on the right is also too scared to look. Right? The story here makes sense because it's linear and there's a specific order of how we look at the subjects. Now, let's flip that around. Here we have bear number 1. I don't want to look. Bear number 2. Mom, I'm scared. And bear number 3, which is just the mother standing there. You notice how this type of storytelling isn't as effective as the previous way? What about these bald eagles fighting for a fish? Well, if we were to read from the left to the right, we feel that the left bald eagle is the aggressor trying to steal the fish from the left bald eagle. However, if we were to flip this around, notice how the right bald eagle, which was the left one before, is now the aggressor. And if we did not have directionality, lack of direction, there's chaos in the photo. Like, who's the antagonist? What are they doing exactly? So in photos, we need prominent subjects to lead the eye. The one chick all the way to the left that stands out with its head up, right? These are known as cygnets. Baby swans are called cygnets. Stands out more than the rest. And why is that? Because he breaks continuity. Because he's brighter. Because he's not in the same position as all the other chicks. And after seeing that initial chick, we scan our eyes across the cygnets feeding on the aquatic plants that the mother has delivered. And our eyes naturally follow the curvature of the neck all the way to the beak and coming full circle. So in case we were wondering, oh, what are the chicks eating? All right. This picture shows us that, what's under the beak is that aquatic grass that they're all munching on. Now this photo works for me because there is also a very important area here that does not have anything, negative space. This negative space. Imagine if we had this negative space filled up, say with kayakers and lily pads. It would be way too complicated. We wouldn't know where to direct our eyes, right? So it wouldn't work like this. There needs to be negative space. Now let's talk a little bit about cropping. A close-up in still photography is a type of shot that tightly frames a person or object. This could be macro, or it could just be a tighter framing of your subject. Now I love these guys, Dall sheep in Alaska. They're quite amazing to see them traverse these really rugged terrain on the cliff sides. And through this photo, well, when I saw this photo, I wanted people to be amazed at the abilities of Dall sheep. and ask yourself, how on earth do these sheep climb these mountainsides and not die, right? How do they survive in this kind of terrain? Well, this photo shows the sheep on a mountain, and while it's a very nicely framed shot with great lighting and row of thirds, it doesn't really quite convey the story of living on the edge, right? Therefore, I got a little closer to the ledge and took this shot. This tighter close-up gives us the impression of a very steep cliff. The circle to the left, you can see its hind hooves just barely, getting a grip on the ledge. And it also tells us the story of why these sheep risk their lives every day climbing these mountains. And it's to get this kind of grass, their food. Now, wildlife photography isn't wildlife photography without focus on your characters, on your subjects. Focusing photography is a lot more than about getting sharp photos or being able to see what you're looking at. Focus can enhance the subject by making it stand out from or blending into the surroundings. Focus can draw you in, and with the right focus, you can create emotional connections between the subject in the photo and the viewer. And I always like to think of it as the eyes of the animals really give soul to the photo. Let's take a look at this photo, right? Our scaly friend here. Not quite a mammal, right? It's cold-blooded, but nonetheless, we want to feel that our subjects have soul. Right? This is a photo of an American alligator chomping at a fish. And notice how its eye is out of focus. That was done deliberately through Photoshop. The original photo looks like this. And notice the difference that it makes us feel. It's no longer a plastic alligator. It's alive. It's hunting. Now, symmetry is also great in aiding your stories. It's also called formal balance. Symmetrical balance is the most common way to photograph an image. In symmetry, balanced photos, both sides of the frame have equal weight and they even mirror each other. Subjects are intentionally centered to look perfectly symmetrical when split horizontally or vertically in half. Take a look at this example of a cub bear with its sibling on one side and the mother on the other side. Notice the symmetry in this? There's definitely a rhythm going on. It's like a W. It goes down, then it goes up a little, then it goes down and back up. And therefore there's rhythm and symmetry in this photo. Now, just 2 seconds later, the bear moved. And this is what I got. While the bear is still very cute, it's the same bear, it doesn't carry that symmetry. Therefore, it doesn't work as effectively as the photo prior. And this is something really big, perspective. When you see wildlife photographers photographing in the wild, they like to get low, right? And why do we get low? Because it gives us a different perspective, right? So use your feet, change your shooting perspective, and use your lens to condense or spread out the scene. That's why we shoot with super telephotos, like 600s and over 1,000. Since wildlife doesn't always cooperate, it's important to be patient or set camera traps or whatever and shoot to get your tight shots. Right, so this is one perspective, shooting very low. This is a crocodile shot from up top. Now, I'm actually on a bridge right here, but you don't feel that threat anymore. It doesn't feel like a dangerous animal. Perspective can also impact how we feel about the subject, right? This is shot with a super telephoto with a very large aperture. And here, this is a baby chick that has just hatched. And what it reminds me of are those infant pictures, baby pictures, and like the cradle, very cute, very delicate. However, when I used fisheye lens to shoot these, it pulls everything, it pulls the bird towards us and pushes everything away, therefore giving us a different feel. So this all leads to visual storytelling. What is visual storytelling? A big part of it is anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism is making an animal or object behave and appear like human. Winnie the Pooh or Simba the lion from the Lion King, right? It's ultimately done to make the subjects in our photos relatable. So when I look at this picture, I find it hilarious. And why is that? Because I'm thinking that it's blowing its nose, a chew, right? Or it could be you, it smells, and it wasn't me, right? I think that's very funny. We have photos like this, where we have a newborn chick with his mother looking over it. And what comes to mind is, get me a new diaper now, right? It's crying. While this is a good photo, it's well lit, evenly lit, right? You see everything in focus. It's not very relatable because it doesn't have that story. It does not lead the imagination and does not leave an impact with the viewer as the previous photos did. Good example of these are, I like to look at cartoons or Disney, right? Disney, there's Shere Khan from the Jungle Book. Now, adjectives that come into my mind are fierce, regal, and dangerous. This drawing to the right makes me feel as if the tiger is very confident, conniving, yet cunning. When I went to India, I had that in mind. I wanted to get that cunningness off the tiger. Very sneaky, ready to ambush. I'll try different styles of shooting. Still zoomed in, but making the tiger feel more regal. Or even zoomed out more, like this, with the mist in the background, the slight brightness of the sun. Feels completely different, doesn't it? So let's talk about number of subjects. A single subject works great for portraits, but most of the time, two subjects are better because there's more you can work with in terms of composition. The more animals you have in the shot, the more complex it'll be, and that gets very dangerous. The proper composition is essential to when you have more subjects. Take this photo for example. Does this work? If we took out the goose from the left, what about this? If we left the center one there? How about this? Without the center one? See, my point is that composition is all about balance. When there isn't harmony, there's dissonance. And sometimes dissonance is good, but oftentimes we want to find that harmony and that balance. Balance of size, balance of shape, having prominent objects off-center makes things more interesting. Having balance puts the viewer at ease. So let's talk a little bit about balance. Oh, this is a friendly snowy owl, right? Single subject here, following the rule of thirds. It looks nice, but what's better than that? Well, what about a flying snowy owl? And getting the snowy owl in focus while it's flying isn't too easy. But what's better than a flying snowy owl? Two flying snowy owls coming right at you, right? So what if we balance the scene with two owls instead of one? What if we had one to the bottom left and one to the top right? Notice how the owl A is bigger, it's closer, it's better lit, more detail coming from the left. And owl B is there only to complement owl A. It's out of focus, but more in focus than the background. They're adding more significance. And that leads me to complexity. So I love street photography. I live in New York City. I love street photography. I go out as much as I can. I love the complexity of street photography and I love the richness of it. And I like how it can often seem confusing when looking at a street photo, but if you dive deeper into it, you see that there's many layers and it kind of unravels itself if you pay enough attention to the different components of the photo. And that also works for wildlife photography. In this photo, we have three chicks feeding on the same fish, and it makes for a very cute and heartfelt story, right? Three chicks, it's a bit cluttered, right? It's a bit complicated, and there's definitely a story going on. But how can we tell a better story? Something more complicated, but better. In my opinion, this photo takes the previous one up a notch in terms of complexity, not complexity. But this one works in a different way. It's not just a picture of a feeding. You have the mother trying to stuff the fish down the chick's throat. Its sibling pinning the feet down and fighting with that chick, with the fish. And the father bird, all the way on the right, which is out of focus, just observing and looking at itself like, I don't want to be here anymore, right? And this makes it a lot more interesting. Complexity works done right, but so does simplicity. In many cases, the power of a photograph is inversely proportional to how many different elements it has. Less is more. Simple wildlife photo can be very powerful if created with a colorful or interesting background. Now, this is a very common bird. It's called the common tern, and it's almost everywhere in the world, including Antarctica. This is taken in the Arctic, and there was a field of flowers. There wasn't a bird there, but I was looking at the field of flowers, and I saw the birds at the corner of my eyes, and I just waited there until it flew into frame. And I think it works. Simple, but effective. Same for this photo. This is taken with a super telephoto, I think 1200 millimeters, at a beach near my house. You can see these deers coming into view, and I just waited there. And I got the layers and the colors and also the moon. So enough of these calming photos. Let's get into the suspense, the action, right? The 5 main elements of suspense is conflict. Every suspenseful photo needs conflict. The intensity of the action is another important component to build suspense. Atmosphere, elements that express tone and mood in the environment will elevate the suspense of the photo. High stakes, the risks involved for the subject. And 5, details, attention to small cues that craft a little more interesting story. So let's move on to this photo. We have 2 giraffes here. What are they doing, right? It's very confusing. Well, this is a unique action shot. Doesn't emphasize conflict. There's no point of impact. And the limbs are on the ground, which adds to the stability of the subjects. So my final verdict for this photo is that it's not something I would put in my portfolio. Okay, all right. This one seems a bit better. Okay. Now, the pros. I have a lower perspective, so I'm in on the action a little better. There's better lighting for sure. There's eye contact, very focused, and there's also a point of contact with the antlers. Right? The cons, it doesn't look as clean. I mean, it looks a little too clean. There should be things flying around if they're fighting, right? The atmosphere, remember the atmosphere. It's also quite boring, in my opinion. So the final verdict is that this is not something I would put in my portfolio. Now, let's step it up a notch. We have these 2 antelopes going at it. Right? Now, what do we see? We see a tighter crop on the action. They're locking antlers. There's eye contact. There's point of contact. It's more dramatic, but there's a lack of environment, and the lighting is very harsh. This, again, is just something I would put in my portfolio. Now, what I would put in my portfolio would be something like this. All right. Notice all the details in the atmosphere in this photo. We have 2 points of contact with the antlers. We have overcast lighting. We have direct eye contact. I'm shooting from the point of view from the deer, right? And they're interacting with the environment. It's so cool. You see the water splashing everywhere. And there's also details. If you look all the way to the right, it's fall. You see the leaf, the orange leaf there, right? So this is what I would put in my portfolio and what I think would be an opening shot. Let's talk about backgrounds. When it comes to wildlife photography, always pay attention to backgrounds. I know we get a little sidetracked or focus on the animals so much that we kind of ignore what's behind it, whether it be a fence or litter or just people walking behind the animals. Right? So you want to add and subtract elements to get a well-balanced background. So compose your subject with the background. It doesn't have to be a fancy background, but pay attention to the backgrounds. Here I have a shot of a gosling And you wouldn't believe it, but I took this at a parking lot after coming out of the movie. So the lines are the parking lines, and it was wet, it was damp, and I saw this little guy running. I slowed down my shutter speed, and it looks like it's actually running a track. And so the background adds to the story, and it makes it a lot more compelling rather than just a cousin jumping and running around. In this photo, we have a monkey relaxing on a beach. And it feels different than a monkey in a zoo because we have the background, we have the palm trees, we have the clouds, we have the blue waters. Foregrounds are also very important. We have to remind ourselves that we live in a three-dimensional world. The foreground of a composition is a visual point that appears closest to us. And we want to use that foreground wisely to create three-dimensional feels and depth. So here we see a leopard in the dry, arid Sri Lankan jungle, right? We have the leaves in the front, we have the leaves in the back, but the leopards can focus. And it looks like it's hiding, it's camouflaging. And that's what I'm trying to convey here. We have this other photo, also of a foreground. I used the foreground in this photo to mask the majority of the subjects to create intimacy. This is a newborn monkey, right? And you see the nipple on the right of the mother. It's a very mammal thing to do to nurse. I find it very intimate and very special of a moment. Therefore, I wanted to create that foreground to hide them just a bit, enough that we could see what they're doing and how young the monkey is, but also giving them a sense of privacy. Elements other than the environment can be used to create foreground as well. Here, I purposely cropped off the mother's head and limbs to bring the focus of the baby sloth. The arms closest to us makes for the foreground and leading lines to our subject. It's a dicey choice for a crop, but this is published on the front page of the magazine and also made a double page spread. So don't be afraid, be bold, and try out new things. Ultimately, what we want to do is create a memory for your audience. Remember the principles and elements. The details matter, all right? The photos that invigorate the audience's imagination are powerful. Our memories are plastic, and the power of direction within a photograph can direct our attention to what the photographer wants us to remember. This wasn't a photo that I originally liked, but I bumped into a friend that was with me when I took this photo, and he kept asking me if I had the photo where we saw a sunrise coming out of the owl's eyes. And for the life of me, I didn't know what he was referring to until I started cropping to this photo. And I saw, wow, there was a sunrise. It's so small and minuscule in this photo, right? Yet it was what was seared into his memory. And from there, I went on to look at other photos I took during that morning. So get creative with different techniques I've shared and make your photos transcend the scene or the print. Remember to focus on getting the soul of the animal. And remember to draw in your audience to the environment, the background, the foreground of the animal, right? Because wildlife photographers often venture into very cold or very hot climates, very difficult places to get to. And it's definitely something that we want to share. You know, let your photos be a portal to take people to scenes that they've never imagined, giving personalities to animals. And before these shorebirds, I only thought that mammals like dogs and cats had emotions and could show bond. But that isn't the case. You give your audience the front row seats to stories about survival and conflict. Give them a raw sense of survival that the animals have to go through. And love. Use your photos to create stories that pass in a fleeting moment, but remain timeless. And while I'm out there, you know, story isn't just about climates, but also about the failures in the progression of events. I went to Alaska this one trip and took 80,000 shots to get one shot of the fish going in the bear's mouth. And I missed plenty of shots. but I got a few shots which were quite interesting, displaying the various behaviors of the animal, eating on the fish, and ultimately getting what I was initially looking for. Not to discount the previous photos, right? Because you want to create the story, the complete story. And I want to end by telling you guys that a photo is powerful when you make it relatable. It's something I learned while shooting for National Geographic. Relatable photos create a longer lasting impression. Photos I took for publications often have an emphasis on relatability to humans rather than the caliber of aesthetics. A touch of humor can be nice. Here we have a mother feeding his chick, but smearing the food all over his head, which I found really funny. And also, just funny photos of animals out in the wild. Right? Now, I want to put up a workshop, and I would like if you guys to join me for a one-of-a-kind wildlife photography workshop where I dive into culling and selection process when I use, which I use at the National Aquarium. Understand why some photographs make the cut while others don't. This workshop will give insight into my workflow. We will dissect my contact sheets, discover the types of editing that make images pop off the screen, and get a feel for the insight I've learned through publications like the Times Magazine and National Geographic. This workshop will include a critique and live editing session where I will revive your photos with a keen eye and introduce strategies on how to create more impact both in the field and also in Lightroom. I will have this workshop up on my website, and it's something that Joe will talk about. These are the before and afters of some of the photos that I will show you how I worked on. We have a bear here coming towards me. It's shot at a high eye, so it's quite dark. But after a bit of tweaking, we get this. So thank you so much for joining. Right, I'm so glad you could all be here to listen to me. And that's pretty much it.
Sean, thank you so much. That was very educational. I learned so much on that one myself. Would you entertain some questions from the audience now?
I would love to.
Okay, great. Why don't you, if you have a question, why don't you just ask the question, just push your space bar down and then you can talk. So if you have a question for Sean, just ask one if you would, please. If we don't have one from the audience, I have one for you. And that is, you must spend all of your time, it seems, on your stomach. It looks like it. It seems like everything is at a low angle. Can you just chat a little bit about that? I mean, are you always down low?
Well, for one thing, I think I need a better chiropractor because I'm having neck problems now. But yeah, I'm always low. It doesn't have to be low. I want to get in the perspective that's not very human. I want to get in the perspective of these animals and tell a story through their point of view.
Okay.
So for these little birds, well, I have to get on my stomach because they're that small.
Mhm.
But when it comes to lions or bears, I could very well be standing up.
Okay. With your sneakers on, ready to run. Okay. You have a question for Mark. Mark, do you want to ask that one?
I have a question.
Okay, Terry.
On the last shot of the bear that you showed coming down the path, how close was that bear to you?
A bit too close. I would say I was about 40, maybe 30 yards. I was shooting with a telephoto, so quite some distance, but the problem is that when you're shooting with a telephoto, you often enter this tunnel vision where you're so focused on the animal, you don't realize how close it's getting to you. So it's great to have a spotter, but also paying attention to your position in proximity to the animal.
Thank you.
Sean, we have a question from Mark. Do you use a flash at all?
Flash, okay. So shooting professionally, I had to use flashes in certain cases. When I shot underwater or when I was doing IDs or surgery, where I needed to shoot with high f-stops up to f32 or f22, and I had to use big flashes. But when I'm out in the field by myself, I like to shoot with no flash. I like to work with natural light and kind of find my angle as to how to direct that light.
Because I just noticed with your backlit subjects, sometimes I know people use a little bit of flash to kind of lighten up the darker area a little bit.
Yeah, well, it all depends on the environment, right? There are photos, like for example, the photo I have up right now of these chicks, right? They are backlit, but the sand is really bright and really white. So whatever color comes off from the sky kind of reflects off the sand. Therefore, if you just pull up your shadows a little, you could get that detail to come out.
Great, thank you.
Sean, we have a question from Richard. Rich, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, Sean, I thought I heard you mention some obscene number of photographs you took at one shot. Is that a continuous kind of frustration that you do shoot? I mean, it makes the rest of us feel really good about it. But do you find that you have some kind of unconscious goal of reducing the number of pictures and spending more time, or do you just feel like it's good to shoot because animals are moving, changing, et cetera, and you can't but overshoot?
So it's very interesting that you asked that, because years ago, without the focus that we have now, we have eye tracking focus and 20, 30 frames per second right now. But years ago, I had to shoot before the animal was moving and follow through until the animal stopped, right? And that could be a lot of photos. And there are times in the wild where I'm photographing bears that are fighting for 20 minutes, right? I'm filling up my card here, and I'm hoping that they will stop so I have card space left for other photos. Now, I also shoot a lot because I miss a lot of photos. And by miss, I mean to say in the sense of not just getting the focus and the sharpness on the animal, but also, you know, there's certain photos where the animal's just not looking at you the correct way. Maybe it's like a centimeter off, right? So you want to take that abundance of photos so you can really go in there and select the photo that you're looking for. And yeah, it's a obscene amount of photos. I have over 1 million shots on a few of my cameras, so I do take a lot of photos. And skill to overcome that is through culling. Your workflow through Lightroom and culling, which is something that I would teach in my workshop.
If you're talking and if you could mute yourself, so because we can hear some background noise. Okay, Sean, continue. I'm sorry.
Oh no. I believe that answers your question.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for Sean? If you do, just touch your space bar and ask them, please.
Yeah, I have another question, Rich Scar. You're from New York City, whatever. Do you shoot any wildlife in New York City besides humans?
Wildlife. Well, believe it or not, when people ask me this, I tell them that there's an abundance of wildlife in New York City, and they often scoff and laugh at that notion. But there is a lot of wildlife. Well, we have a lot of rats, we have a lot of pigeons, so hawks and all these different predatory animals are there to hunt these little animals. So yes, I do shoot in New York City quite often.
Yeah, my understanding is that in Brooklyn, you can find a number of parakeets in the wild, which is interesting.
It's funny, there are parakeets right down my block.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Great presentation.
Sure, thank you so much.
Any other questions for Sean? Okay, Sean, if everybody wants to unmute themselves, I think Sean deserves a very loud round of applause for that wonderful presentation. So,
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sean.
so much, Sean. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to be, we'll be sending out the recording tomorrow, but you will not be getting a copy of his presentation, just the recording for tomorrow. And then we will send out a little bit about his workshop for your information. And I think you're thinking of that as like maybe a 3-hour, Sean. Is that about what you're looking at?
It will be a 3-hour where I review some of your photos. I can do some critiquing and also work on editing these photos to get them to pop off the screen.
Oh, so you'll take a happy snapper shot and turn it into a wall hanger for us.
Hi.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, thank you, guys. Then on everybody on Wednesday night, weather holding will be at the downtown at the Capitol, photographing the fountains in the rear. And we will see you next Monday night for a image review with Mike Donovan. Thank you much.
Sean, your images are beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank-
great job, Sean.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right. Thank you, Joe.
thank you, guys. Yes.
Have a great night.
Good night. Well, they're all logging off now. We'll just stay for a few minutes. And Sean, that went over really well. That was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Really
that,
appreciate it.
that was really, really good.
It was awesome to hear a presentation without hearing the words f-stop. Shutter speed. That was a tremendous subject matter for sure.
Yeah,
I wanted to bring something new to the table. I tried.
You did well.
well, you know, Sean, your topic was wildlife, but the principles you were talking about are applicable to every genre of photography. And that was so cool. Well, I have to ask you, on that sheep shot you had on the side of the mountain, it was really close. It looked like you were hanging by a thread on that mountain. I could just imagine it. I mean, like, were you in danger of falling off or what?
You mean the one with the doll shoots, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So funny story. I spent 2 weeks in Denali looking for the doll sheep, and they were always about 1,000 feet away, like a little dot, right?
Yeah.
And on the day to the airport, I was passing these mountains. I was driving by this cliffside, and they were right there. So I grabbed my gear, I parked my car on the side of the road, and I just scurried up the cliff and took the pictures.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was quite steep, but I went slow and safe, so that was okay. Yeah.
I was at Nickerson Beach, as you know, and I was telling some folks that I was editing my images, and I had your website up on my on the other monitor, and I was saying, now how did he do that? How did he do this? So I'm looking forward to your workshop, to where I can see how you did that kind of stuff. I mean, is that the way they came out of the camera, or did you do some magic Sean trick there that that I need to know about?
I'm about to reveal some secrets.
Yeah. Okay. So that was very nice. That was really good.
Oh, I believe Dan raised his hand.
Dan? Okay, Dan, did you have a question?
Oh, not actual question. I just restarted my computer and my video's working now, so I waved.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a win.
okay,
But
great.
thank you for the shot. I'm gonna definitely look at that. I missed some of the thing about your webinar coming up, or whatever you guys called it. I forget now.
Mhm.
But I missed most of these because I'm in Italy and you guys come on at 1 a.m.
You're in Italy. Will you get
Not
bonus?
now. I'm in Michigan working on the house, but we've been in Italy since June.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well,
I
thanks
think-
for joining us, Dan.
Thank you.
I think you're planning on that in mid-October sometime, aren't you, Sean? Sean, aren't you
Yeah,
on your workshop in mid-October?
Yep.
Is that going to be a weeknight then, or what?
It depends on your schedule, but I was hoping to have it a little earlier in the day where people are a little more energetic, but it's
Okay,
depending on your schedule and see how it might fit.
okay. All right.
I do have one question.
Sure.
Yeah, when those shots you were showing tonight, how many of them were the first time you were at the location? How many of them did you know the location and what usually is?
That's a difficult question to answer because You know, with wildlife, there has to be a lot of luck. All right, that I think that's a given. But it isn't exactly in the sense that it's just pure luck. It's time. So the more time you spend somewhere, the luckier that you'll get. So there have been instances where I got to the place and got the shot within 5 minutes of parking my car, and then spending the next 3 weeks getting nothing. Right? There's also been times where it's all random and the shots are sporadically done.
Are you running
Thank
into any COVID problems?
Well, COVID cuts down travel, so I haven't been able to go to many places this year, but I've done Alaska and Yellowstone this year.
Were you in Yellowstone in the winter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I like to go out for photos, I like to go really hands-on, right? So a lot of camping involved. And my Yellowstone trip had me camping in the backcountry for a little over 2 weeks. And the code is that a guy was, I think, negative 30, 35.
Okay.
That's where I had the photo of the bison in the snow. It was taken at night from a camp.
Oh my gosh. Were you by yourself?
Oh no, I dragged my wife along with me.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I see you laughing.
Good to have somebody to carry all your equipment.
My gosh. Okay. Well, again, thank you very much. It was great, Sean.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
staying overtime.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay.
Yes, very much.
We'll see you. I'm going to end it now. Okay. Thank you much.
All right. Good night.
Good night.